Today's verse is from Revelation, chapter 21, verses 1 through 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true."
Amen.
Do you have a favorite movie where there are so many things going on in the movie, a lot of activity, a lot of action maybe, a lot of heartbreak, and then at the end of the movie is when it all kind of culminates and you think, oh, there it is. Maybe in your movie, your favorite movie, the hero is just on the brink of death. And the enemy has the hero on the ground ready to make his or her final blow. And you think to yourself when you're watching this movie, how could this get any worse? My hero is about to be slain. I'm a huge fan of superhero movies, you know. So when it comes to those things, I get pretty serious. You know, when I'm watching this great, most recent one, Wonder Woman, you know, it seems like she's just going to be obliterated, and then I won't give away the ending, but it just doesn't happen. And then maybe you watch another movie, maybe it's more softer, let's say, but at still the same time, there is that apex of the movie where you think everything's going downhill, but then something turns 180 degrees, and the hero wins again. Good triumphs over evil. You see, that seems to be a theme in our society, which even though we don't see it a whole lot in the cultural realm, it seems like we're starting to see this theme where people just understand and they expect, when I watch a movie, good is going to triumph over evil. I watch this movie because I want to see how that happens. But I come with an expectation. I want you to picture with me, and I know this is the Christmas season. Yes, we read in Revelation. You know, it seems kind of odd. But it really fits in well, and I'll explain why. Because if you think about it, in those days when this book was written, John was sent to the island of Patmos for preaching and teaching and writing about his faith, for following the risen Christ, for leading others into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. These type of things were happening, and he was a direct threat, in their opinion, to the Roman government. You see, the Roman government at this time had some evil governors in control, and some regional leaders, but also some just horrific leaders at the very top as well. They would persecute Christians, they would kill them, they would kill Jews, and anybody who had any faith that was an uplifting faith, they were gone. And if you were a person who followed a faith that said things like, less is more, those who are in poverty will be those who are increased in the kingdom. When you start presenting the upside-down kingdom mentality, as we have talked about before, that is a direct threat to the Roman government, because they're trying to tell you that, stick with us, kid, and you'll be wealthy. You'll have influence. You'll have everything that you want if you stick with us. If you follow everything that we ask you to follow, if you do everything that we ask you to do, if you are in a place, if you go and you give as much as we tell you to give, taxes and all of that, then you will be prosperous too. So, the message of Christ, in their opinion, was a direct threat to the government. So they threw John and exiled him off to Island Patmos. So they had Roman guards that were guarding him, and a lot of the language that you see in Revelation is very odd language, very metaphoric language, very flowery language sometimes. But one thing you got to remember is he had to write in a certain way to get it past the guards so he can get it to his people. So I can imagine the Roman guards are like, this guy's crazy, I'm going to pass this on because there's no way anyone's going to know what this means. But there were certain code languages that they all understood at home. Well, anyway. So you have this horrific culture that is controlling this area. And in those times, it just seemed like for Christians, things cannot get any worse. And if they did, it's over. We are just one situation away, one bad circumstance away from this whole thing just falling into itself, collapsing, dissolving. I won't be surprised, but probably thought a lot of them said, if I show up next week and I'm the only one that really cares anymore. And John, far away, in exile, knew that his job was to uplift, encourage, and to set forth a focus and a mission to them that had said things like, don't give up because the best is yet to come. I mean, we saw towards the end of this passage that John read, thank you, John, for reading that he says just crazy things, that picture yourself being persecuted, your friends being killed, and then John writes this letter and he says this little phrase, I am making all things new. Well, and speaking about God, of course. My first thought was, well, can you hurry it up? I mean, come on. People being killed. There are villages that are being burned down because they contain a high density of Christians. And the Word of God is being persecuted and hated. And there's animosity. And you're telling me that God is going to make all things new. Great. Okay. And it just seemed like in those days that it just didn't seem like it made a whole lot of sense anymore to make your trip to Jerusalem and to worship there, to make your sacrifices, because, man, you come out in public and you do that, wow, you're in trouble. So he goes on to this word that was communicated by Jesus to John, in letter form, to these churches. And he's describing this beautiful future where God was going to come again, where Jesus, the Messiah, was going to come again and make all things right. He was trying to instill in their hearts that there is a hope beyond your circumstance, beyond your understanding, beyond your resource. He was saying things like this, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. There is a new dwelling for the king. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. When we talk about Jerusalem in the New Testament, a lot of the times we're talking about not only the physical location of Jerusalem, but Jerusalem literally meant the people of God. So it's interesting to say that there is this mentality that he's trying to give of this wedding, this marriage, this beautiful ceremony where uniting would happen. And there wouldn't be any of this me and him, and there wouldn't be any of this like hiding in shame like we see in Genesis, where Adam and Eve, they messed up big time. They lied to God. All this kind of stuff. But they hid in shame from him. So all of that is turned upside down when we see in Revelation where he's saying things like, I saw her like a beautiful bride, pure, white. You can imagine the dress, all these kind of things. And then here is the phrase that he writes on behalf of Jesus speaking through him, that is the culmination of the entire purpose of Scripture, of Jesus coming, and everything between. And that's second half of verse 3. Now, the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. We have this mental picture of someone, and this is what I have a mental picture of, someone pressing a button, everything being rewinded back to the Garden of Eden. It's as if you can imagine, I'm kind of nerdy, I like these kind of movies. If you can imagine stepping into a time machine and traveling back in time, and going to Eve and Adam and saying, you're capable of so much more. He is describing to us a time where time will go back. Where once again we will have the opportunity and the right and the desire to live among the God that created us from day one. It's a little different. So what does this have to do with Christmas? Christmas is not about the elf on the shelf. It's about Santa. He sees you when you're sleeping, by the way. It's not about the different programs that we have or the rituals, or it's not even about eating with family, eating lots. Let me tell you that. It's not about present exchange. It's not about all of these sort of things. The very idea of Christmas is about hope. Every square inch of it. It's because in the worst possible time when it comes to, if we're looking outside, looking in, we're looking directly into this whole story of Jesus coming as a baby and all of that. I think we know that story, right? That Jesus came at the worst possible time. I mean, it didn't make any sense. Think about it. The emperor, the Roman emperor, had complete 100% unadulterated control over the entire world, pretty much. Whatever he said went. He wasn't a Hebrew. They worshipped pagan gods. In fact, they worshipped the actual emperor. They thought he was a god on earth. The money was going straight to the Roman government, pretty much most of the money you got. It was a peaceful time, but at the same time it was only peaceful because if you crossed us, we'd kill you. You see, if I were to write the story, and if I were to be a Hebrew in ancient times, I would say, well, the Messiah should come at a time where there is a Jewish king, or we're in control. We have all the promised land that we have is under our control. That maybe we've expanded our territory. Hey, that would be a blessing, wouldn't it? That we have godly people who have set up the temple, who just honor God, who carry the Ark of the Covenant, all those kind of things in the way that they should. And that is the context where I would want the Messiah to come in. Hey, red carpet treatment, right? What could be better than that? But Jesus, in all of his sovereignty, all of his power, all of his resource, decided that he was going to come into existence in a time where it just didn't make any sense. And the world had to accommodate this newborn baby. You wouldn't think so, right? Because Luke chapter 2, we see the whole story of the census being taken, and we see them coming back to Bethlehem because that's where Joseph was from. And then you see this weird little thing about They couldn't stay in the hotel because the hotel's full, so they had to go to a stable right down the street. But at the same time, Jesus came, and the very first thing that happens, and we talked about this in Sunday school today, 9:30 every Sunday morning, if you want to come. That Jesus came, and before he was even out of the womb, he was already being rejected. Full hotel. The inn was full. But yet, he still came. Fast forward, he still loved. Fast forward even more, he still died and was resurrected. And I don't think any square inch of his life you can look at and say, well, there was a time where everyone loved him. I'm sure he got a good following from time to time and all of those kind of things, but for the most part, the world despised and rejected him. We see that in Isaiah, that prophecy. That this Messiah that would come would be despised and rejected, hated by men. I don't know, I would have written the story a little differently. You see, and here's why I would have written the story a little differently. Because I'm the type of personality that if I'm going to meet someone of influence, I want to make sure I have my stuff together. If I've known people, and I was like this too when I gave my life to Jesus, I'm going to make sure I have all my stuff together before I come to God, because I want Him to see me as I should be. But the world was not prepared for a Messiah that came in the midst of darkness, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. All those kind of things. So there was this idea of accommodation that had to happen. This, in the darkness, light shined. So fast forward again to Revelation, we see the stage being set once again in the worst possible time. He's talking about a revival that's going to come, where everything's going to be made new. Where the stuff that you're dealing with in the darkness, and all the death and dying and suffering, all this kind of stuff, it's going to be a memory. Like, I remember when that kind of stuff happened. And Jesus will come back again. The very middle, the apex of this story is Jesus giving hope. Or it seems like no matter what culture we're in, we can make a case for this. It seems like things can't get any worse. Things are so dark. Things are so awful. But Jesus is telling us through John in this letter, hey, don't worry, I'm going to make all things. So we have that hope. And I wonder today, if we as people of Fisher's Point, people in general, Christians, get into times where we just kind of shut out God because of our circumstances. Say, Lord, let me fix this, and then I'll invite you back in. It's like when you invite company over, and you're all guilty of this, I know you. You invite company over, and you make a mad rush for cleaning everything up before they get there. So that whenever they enter in, it gives the impression that this is the way we live all the time. I don't have a junk drawer. You have a junk drawer? My kids always put away their toys every time they go. We have that mentality, given to us by our culture that we have to have our stuff together before the king comes over. Or before our guests come over. That's why we see, it's so weird when we see in the gospel account where Jesus looks at Zacchaeus and says, I'm coming to your house today. Lisa, we just heard about this. My wife would have killed me. You mean you invited him over? We don't even have... Or, he invited himself over, really, but you get the idea. How many wives or spouses or, husbands or something would raise their hands today and say, I would kill my spouse if they invited someone over and not told me at the beginning. No? No murders here? Okay, good. No one's willing to admit it. All right, I get it. But Jesus, paramount, first thing. Jesus, middle of his ministry. Jesus, at the end, all about hope. That things that you're seeing in front of you don't have to be like the things that they were. They don't have to be. And with a heart cleansing, with obedience, with allowing him to be king, and we see that in Revelation chapter 21. When he's allowed to be king, things work better.
Yes.
Things function as they should. So are you going to allow him today to be king over your heart? To make all things new for you? To not look at your circumstances or what discourages you the most and think, well, that's it. The enemy's winning. The villain's about to slay. But no, God has something even more. I want to pray with us today, and then I have some more things to talk about, more on the business side of things. So if you would just bow your heads. Father God, we are so grateful for you. We love you. We know that you are who you say you are, but Lord, sometimes fear holds us back from living a abundant life. We understand what hope means. It means that it's the anticipation of good things to come, Lord. And we know if we put you on the throne again, then everything is going to work as it should. We can have confidence in you. We know that because you came as a baby in the worst of circumstances, we know that even rejection was the very beginning of your timeline here on earth. We know that you will still make all things new. And you still love us. Give us a new heart today. Provide. We ask that you continue to keep us encouraged. In the name we pray.
Amen.